Hello and welcome. Today, we're journeying back in time, not to the Rome of emperors and grand Colosseum games you might imagine, but to a period of seismic change, a time of crisis and transformation, the late Roman Republic. Picture this, the 2nd century BC, Rome is the undisputed heavyweight champion of the Mediterranean. It has conquered Carthage, subdued Greece, and its legions are the most formidable military machine the world has ever seen. From the outside, Rome is a picture of strength. A sprawling republic built on law, order, and the power of its citizens. But peel back that gilded layer, and you find deep, festering wounds. The very conquests that made Rome rich were also tearing it apart. Vast fortunes flowed into the city, but they landed in the hands of a select few, the senatorial elite, the aristocrats who owned enormous estates, or latifundia, worked by legions of enslaved people captured in Rome's wars. This created a staggering wealth gap. The backbone of the Roman army, the small citizen farmer, was being squeezed out of existence. While they were off fighting for years on distant campaigns, their farms back home fell into debt and were swallowed up by their wealthy neighbors. When these soldiers returned, they found themselves landless, jobless, and drifting into the city of Rome, which was becoming a chaotic, overcrowded metropolis. They were still citizens, but they were poor, angry, and disenfranchised. This massive, unstable urban population became a new, volatile force in Roman politics. Ambitious politicians quickly learned that they could win immense power not just through traditional alliances in the Senate, but by appealing directly to this desperate mob, offering them bread and entertainment, paying them at chichensas in exchange for their political support. Meanwhile, the political system itself was groaning under the strain. The Republic's institutions were designed to run a small city-state, not a vast multicultural empire. The annual elections, the checks and balances, the collegiate nature of magistracies, it all started to break down. Corruption became rampant. Provincial governors acted less like administrators and more like vultures, extorting fortunes from the people they were meant to protect. The traditional Roman values of duty, public service, and moderation, the mos maiorum, seemed like a distant memory. This explosive cocktail of social inequality, political corruption, and personal ambition set the stage for a century of chaos. It was an era that would see the rise of powerful individuals who placed their own ambitions above the state. Generals would command armies loyal not to the Republic, but to them personally. Street gangs controlled by rival politicians would clash in the forum. It was the age of the Gracchi brothers, who tried to enact land reform and were murdered for it. It was the age of Marius and Sulla, generals who turned their legions on Rome itself, unleashing bloody civil wars and purges. This wasn't just a political crisis, it was an identity crisis. What did it mean to be Roman anymore? Was it about serving the state, or grabbing what you could for yourself? This period of turmoil, violence, and social upheaval is the crucible in which the Roman Empire would eventually be forged. It's the story of how a republic, built on shared power, collapsed under the weight of its own success, paving the way for one-man rule. This is the world that would produce figures like Pompey, Crassus, and of course, Julius Caesar. Their story and the fall of the Republic is one of the most dramatic and consequential chapters in human history. To understand how the empire came to be, we first have to understand the Republic's spectacular, bloody, and fascinating final act. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the past. See you next time. The morning sun of the Subura spills into the narrow street, a familiar golden haze thick with the smell of baking bread and the distant clang of a blacksmith hammer. This is Rome, not the Rome of marble temples and grand forums you see in pictures, but the Rome of the people. A chaotic, vibrant, sprawling city of tenements and dreams. And it is here, in this bustling, noisy heart of the Republic, that our story begins. Look there. See that young man striding through the crowd? He moves with a purpose that sets him apart. His tunic, though simple, is impeccably clean, and his gaze is sharp, taking in everything. His name is Gaius Julius Caesar. Right now, he isn't the conqueror of Gaul or the dictator for life. He is a young priest, the Flamen Dialis, bound by ancient, arcane rules. He can't ride a horse, touch metal, or even see a knot. His life is a web of religious obligation, a far cry from the military glory his family name, the Iuli, once commanded. His family has noble blood, tracing their lineage back to the goddess Venus herself, but their fortunes have dwindled. They live in this crowded, unfashionable district, a world away from the Palatine Hill where the true elites reside. For Caesar, every day is a subtle battle. A battle against obscurity, against the condescending smirks of wealthier patricians, and against the rigid traditions that confine him. But within him burns an ambition as hot as the forges of Vulcan. He knows, with an unshakable certainty, that he is destined for more than this. He studies rhetoric, devours history, and learns the complex dance of Roman politics, all while fulfilling his priestly duties with a meticulous grace that masks his inner fire. Let's step away from the city's clamor for a moment and journey to the countryside. Here, amidst rolling hills and sprawling estates, life moves at a different pace. This is the domain of Marcus Terentius Varro. He's older than Caesar, a man of letters, a scholar. His wealth isn't just in land, but in knowledge. His library is one of the finest in Italy, filled with scrolls from across the known world. Varro is a traditionalist, a man who believes deeply in the old Roman virtues: duty, piety, and integrity. He looks at the growing chaos in the city, the rampant corruption, and the naked ambition of men like Caesar, and he worries. He sees the Republic, the thing he loves most, being torn apart from within. He writes, he studies, he manages his farms with a steady hand, believing that the strength of Rome lies not in its legions, but in its soil and its traditions. He is the rock against which the waves of change will crash. Now let's return to Caesar's world, to his home. In the modest atrium, a young woman is managing the household with a quiet, firm authority. This is Julia, Caesar's aunt. But she is more than that. She is the wife of Gaius Marius, the great general, the new man who saved Rome from invasion and reformed the army. Though Marius is now gone, his legacy and his political faction, the populares who champion the cause of the people, live on. Julia is the keeper of that flame. She is shrewd, politically astute, and fiercely protective of her family. She sees the same spark in her nephew, Caesar, that she saw in her husband. She guides him, advises him, and connects him with the powerful allies he will meet. She understands that in Rome, power isn't just won on the battlefield. It's forged in whispers, in alliances, and in the unwavering loyalty of family. Back on the streets, Caesar is walking towards the Forum. He passes a group of legionaries, their armor scarred from distant campaigns. He sees the desperate faces of farmers forced off their land by debt, now swelling the city's unemployed masses. He hears the heated debates of senators, their voices echoing from the Curia. These are the pieces of the puzzle that is Rome. A republic groaning under the weight of its own success, teetering on the brink of profound, violent change. And in the middle of it all are these three individuals. Caesar, the ambitious youth, hungry for power and glory, determined to restore his family's name and carve his own destiny. Varro, the staunch conservative, trying to preserve the past and the soul of the Republic through wisdom and tradition. And Julia, the political matriarch, maneuvering behind the scenes, using her experience and connections to shape the future through her brilliant nephew. Their paths have not yet crossed in any meaningful way, but the threads of their lives are beginning to draw together. They represent the great forces at play in this era: the drive for personal ambition, the powerful pull of tradition, and the intricate web of family and politics. The Republic is a stage, and the players are taking their positions. Caesar is still just a minor figure, a young man with a famous name and an empty purse. But the world is changing. The old order is crumbling, and in the chaos, new powers will rise. The story of Caesar is not just the story of one man. It's the story of a republic at a crossroads, and his journey to the top will be shaped, challenged, and influenced by people like the steadfast Varro and the formidable Julia. The first steps have been taken. The climb is about to begin. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you're as fascinated by this period as I am and want to see how these stories unfold, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next episode. We're just getting started. See you next time. Have you ever wondered how a single act of betrayal can shatter an entire era of peace? How the whispers in the corridors of power can become the deafening roar of cannons on the battlefield? Today, we're diving deep into a story of ambition, deception, and the moment a world tipped from fragile stability into the chaos of war. Picture this: the kingdom of Ethel is at the height of its golden age. The banners of the old king, a ruler beloved for his wisdom and fairness, still fly high. But his health is failing, and the question of succession hangs heavy in the air. On one side, there's the crown prince, Alaric, a man of the people, trained in diplomacy and known for his compassionate heart. On the other, his cousin, Lord Valerius, the celebrated general of the armies, a man whose ambition is as sharp as his sword. For years, a delicate balance was maintained. Alaric governed the domestic affairs, ensuring the granaries were full and the people were prosperous. Valerius, in turn, guarded the borders, his legions a seemingly impenetrable shield against foreign threats. They were the two pillars of the kingdom, different in nature but united in purpose. Or so everyone thought. The court was a web of alliances and secrets. Spies listened in shadowed alcoves, and rumors were traded like currency. Valerius, charismatic and commanding, had spent years earning the loyalty of the military elite. He spoke of strength, of expanding Ethel's influence, of a destiny that couldn't be achieved through treaties and talk. He painted Alaric's diplomacy as weakness, his caution as cowardice. He planted seeds of doubt, watering them with promises of glory and spoils for those who would stand with him. The betrayal wasn't a single dramatic event. It was a slow, creeping poison. It began with misplaced orders that led a border patrol loyal to Alaric into an ambush. It continued with funds for public works being mysteriously diverted to arm and supply Valerius's private garrisons. Key loyalists to the crown prince were reassigned to distant, forgotten outposts, their voices silenced, their influence neutralized. Alaric, trusting and perhaps a bit naive, saw these as administrative errors, not the calculated moves of a chess master positioning his pieces for checkmate. The tipping point came during the annual harvest festival, a sacred time of peace and celebration. While the royal court, including a hopeful Alaric, gathered in the capital's grand square, Valerius made his move. He wasn't there. Instead, his most trusted legions, which were supposed to be hundreds of miles away on the northern frontier, marched on the capital under the cover of night. They didn't storm the gates. They were let in by guards who had long ago sworn secret oaths to the ambitious general. By dawn, the city was under lockdown. Valerius's banners had replaced the king's. Alaric awoke not to the cheers of the festival, but to the chilling silence of a coup. He was a prisoner in his own palace. Valerius addressed the public from the royal balcony, not as a traitor, but as a savior. He spoke of a fabricated plot by Alaric to sell out the kingdom to their rivals, the Illyrians. He presented forged documents, paid witnesses, and spun a tale so convincing that many, swayed by his military renown and fearful of the alternative, began to believe it. He claimed the throne not by right of blood, but by necessity to protect Idil from a weak and treasonous prince. This single act of betrayal sent shockwaves across the continent. Neighboring kingdoms who had treaties with Alaric and the Old King were now faced with an unpredictable and aggressive new ruler in Ethel. The Illyrians, falsely accused of plotting with Alaric, saw Valerius's accusation not just as a lie, but as a clear pretext for invasion. They had been looking for an excuse to challenge Ethel's dominance for years, and Valerius had just handed it to them on a silver platter. Diplomacy died overnight. Ambassadors were recalled, and borders were sealed. The Illyrian Empire, citing the need to defend its honor and preempt Ethel's aggression, began mobilizing its formidable war machine. They didn't see a usurper. They saw an opportunity. Smaller states, caught in the middle, were forced to choose sides, their allegiances shifting like sand in the wind. The intricate web of alliances that had kept the peace for a generation completely unraveled. Meanwhile, within Ethel, the kingdom was fractured. While Valerius controlled the capital and the bulk of the army, many provinces remained loyal to the true heir, Alaric. News of the prince's escape from captivity, aided by a few loyal guards, spread like wildfire. He fled to the western mountains, a region known for its fierce independence and loyalty to his family line. From there, he called for all true sons and daughters of Ethel to rise up against the usurper, and so the war began. It wasn't one war, but two. A brutal civil war erupted within Ethel's own borders, pitting legion against legion, neighbor against neighbor. At the same time, the full might of the Illyrian Empire crashed against Ethel's eastern frontier, sensing weakness and eager to claim new territory. The fields that once grew wheat for the harvest festival were now soaked in blood. The shield of the kingdom, once held by Valerius, was now shattered by his own hand. This story teaches us a powerful lesson. The most devastating wars are often not started by foreign enemies, but by turmoil from within. It shows how personal ambition, when unchecked by honor and duty, can become a catastrophic force, dragging millions into a conflict they never wanted. The political maneuvering in the quiet halls of power proved to be far more dangerous than any threat from beyond the borders. A golden age was brought to an end not by an invading army but by a single, calculated betrayal. The war had begun, and the world would never be the same. What do you think? Could Alaric have done more to prevent this? Was Valerius's ambition a product of his time, or a flaw in his character? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history and strategy. We'll see you in the next one. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most tumultuous periods in history. A time defined by the clash of armies, the sting of profound loss, and the ever-shifting sands of alliances. It's a story of ambition, betrayal, and the human cost of conflict. Picture this, a continent on the brink. Old empires were crumbling, and new powers were rising from the ashes, each hungry for dominance. The air was thick with tension, and it was only a matter of time before the first spark ignited a wildfire of war. The initial battles were brutal and swift. Armies, tens of thousands strong, marched across plains, and through dense forests, their banners a vibrant tapestry against a backdrop of grim determination. They fought with a ferocity born of conviction, believing their cause was just. We see this in the Battle of the Whispering Valley, where General Alaric's forces, though outnumbered, used the terrain to their advantage, creating a tactical masterpiece that would be studied for generations. But victory, as they would soon learn, always comes at a price. For every cheer of triumph on one side, there was a cry of anguish on the other. Loss wasn't just a number in a ledger. It was a visceral, heartbreaking reality. Families were torn apart, homes were reduced to rubble, and entire villages vanished from the map. Think of the siege of Oakhaven, a city that held out for months, its people starving but defiant. When its walls finally fell, the loss was immeasurable, not just in lives, but in the crushing of a collective spirit. These moments of defeat were pivotal. They didn't just end battles. They planted the seeds of vengeance and desperation that would fuel the next phase of the conflict. The sorrow was a heavy cloak, worn by soldiers and civilians alike, a constant reminder of what was at stake. This is where the story gets even more complex. As the wars dragged on, the lines between friend and foe began to blur. Yesterday's staunchest ally could become tomorrow's most dangerous enemy. Alliances, once forged in ironclad treaties and sealed with royal marriages, started to fracture under the immense pressure. Why? Survival, pragmatism, the cold, hard calculus of power. Nations that once fought side by side found their interests diverging. The Kingdom of Eldoria, for instance, had long been a partner to the Viscarian Republic. But when Viscaria's expansion threatened Eldoria's trade routes, their decades-long friendship evaporated overnight. Secret meetings were held in candle-lit chambers, spies whispered in shadowy corners, and new pacts were made. This constant realignment created a dizzying and unpredictable landscape where no one could be trusted. A general might wake up to find the army supporting his flank had vanished, having switched sides for a better offer. This era of shifting allegiances was perhaps the most treacherous part of the conflict. It wasn't just about battlefield strategy anymore. It was a high-stakes game of political chess. Leaders had to be master diplomats and ruthless schemers. The infamous Crimson Pact is a prime example, where three rival nations set aside their ancient hatreds to form a temporary and ultimately fragile coalition against a common greater threat. This pact successfully turned the tide of the war, but the moment the threat was neutralized, the old rivalries resurfaced, more bitter than ever before. These shifting alliances show us that in times of extreme crisis, loyalty is often a luxury, and self-preservation becomes the ultimate guiding principle. It's a stark reminder that the bonds holding nations together can be as brittle as glass. So, what can we learn from this chaotic period of battles, loss, and shifting loyalties? We see that war is more than just a series of military engagements. It's a human drama on a massive scale, driven by ambition, fear, and the desperate will to survive. The victories were temporary, the losses were permanent, and the alliances were as stable as a house of cards in a hurricane. This cycle of conflict, grief, and betrayal shaped the world that came after, leaving scars that would take centuries to heal and lessons that we are still grappling with today. The story serves as a powerful cautionary tale about the true cost of war, reminding us that behind every banner and every battle plan are real people whose lives are changed forever. Thanks so much for joining me on this historical journey. It's a complex and often somber topic, but understanding these patterns is crucial to understanding our world. Have you ever wondered what lurked in the shadows of Rome's gleaming marble halls? It wasn't just philosophy and poetry. It was a world of whispers, daggers, and deadly ambition. Today, we're diving deep into the most audacious assassination plots in Roman history, where the fate of an empire often hung by a single treacherous thread. Everyone knows about the Ides of March, right? March 5th, 10th, 44 BC, Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome, walks into the Senate, and is met not with debate, but with daggers. Over 60 senators, men he considered allies, even friends, lunged at him. The sheer scale of this conspiracy is mind-boggling. They weren't just killing a man. They were trying to kill an idea, the idea of a king. But what they didn't realize was that in shedding Caesar's blood, they were watering the seeds of the very empire they sought to prevent. The Republic was dead, and its killers had just handed the keys to Caesar's heir, Octavian. It's the ultimate political irony. But Caesar's end was just one chapter in a long, bloody book. Let's fast forward a bit, meet Caligula. His name alone conjures images of madness and tyranny. Initially, the people loved him, but that love soured as his reign descended into paranoia and depravity. He demanded to be worshipped as a living god, wasted the treasury, and ruled by fear. This couldn't last. The breaking point came in 41 AD. The conspirators weren't senators in the open, but the very men sworn to protect him. The Praetorian Guard, led by their prefect, Cassius Chaerea, whom Caligula had relentlessly mocked, they cornered the emperor in a secluded palace corridor. It was swift, brutal, and personal. They didn't just kill an emperor. They erased a tyrant. This act set a dangerous precedent. The Praetorian Guard now knew they could not only protect emperors, but also create them ... and destroy them. Now, let's talk about a plot that failed, but it's just as fascinating. This is the story of the Pisonian conspiracy in 65 AD, a plot to overthrow one of history's most infamous villains, Emperor Nero. By this point, Nero's behavior had become completely unhinged. He was an artist who saw the empire as his personal stage, and his critics as disposable props. A broad coalition of senators, knights, and even his old tutor, Seneca, had enough. Their plan was to assassinate Nero during the games at the Circus Maximus and install a respected senator, Gaius Calpurnius Piso, as the new emperor. It was a well-thought-out plan, involving dozens of Rome's elites. So what went wrong? Betrayal. A freedwoman named Epicharis, who was part of the plot, tried to recruit a naval officer. Fearing for his own skin, he reported the plot. One by one, the conspirators were rounded up, tortured, and forced to confess. The aftermath was a bloodbath. Nero, consumed by paranoia, unleashed a wave of terror, executing anyone even remotely connected to the plot, including the brilliant Seneca. The Pisonian conspiracy failed to kill the emperor, but it exposed the deep rot at the heart of his court and sealed his fate. Just a few years later, abandoned by everyone, Nero would be forced to take his own life. But not before this spectacular failure showed just how many people wanted him gone. From Caesar to Caligula to Nero, these plots reveal the high-stakes game of power in ancient Rome. It was a city of incredible triumphs, but also of deep, dark secrets. Every handshake could hide a dagger, and every ally could be a potential assassin. The line between loyalty and betrayal was thinner than a razor's edge. These stories aren't just ancient history. They're timeless warnings about ambition, power, and the price of tyranny. They remind us that empires aren't just built with stone and mortar, but are often dismantled by whispers and steel. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the shadows of Rome. Welcome back, history buffs, to our deep dive into the final tumultuous days of the Roman Republic. We've reached the climax of our story, a moment that would forever alter the course of Western civilization. The Ides of March 44 BC, picture this. Rome, a city buzzing with tension. Whispers of tyranny follow Julius Caesar through the streets. He's been declared dictator for life, a title that sits uneasily with a populace that overthrew its king centuries ago. The air is thick with conspiracy, and at its heart are men Caesar once called friends. So how did it come to this? How did the celebrated conqueror of Gaul, the beloved champion of the people, become a figure so feared that his own allies would plot his demise? The answer is complex. Caesar's ambition was limitless. After defeating Pompey the Great in a brutal civil war, he consolidated power like no Roman before him. He initiated sweeping reforms, from the calendar we still use today to land distribution for his veterans. To many, he was a savior, bringing stability after years of chaos. But to the old guard of the Senate, the aristocrats who saw their power and privilege eroding, he was a king in all but name. The conspiracy was led by Gaius Cassius Longinus and Marcus Junius Brutus. Brutus, especially, is a tragic figure. He was a man torn between his personal affection for Caesar and his deeply ingrained republican ideals, believing he was acting to save Rome from despotism. On that fateful day, as Caesar entered the theater of Pompey for a Senate meeting, the conspirators surrounded him. They feigned a petition, then drew their daggers. Legend has it that among the last faces Caesar saw was Brutus, prompting the famous, heartbreaking line, "Et tu, Brute?" "And you, Brutus?" With 23 stab wounds, the most powerful man in the world fell at the foot of his rival's statue. The liberators, as they called themselves, had struck, but they had tragically miscalculated. While the titans of history clashed in Rome, what about the ordinary people caught in the storm? Let's consider the fictional but representative story of a soldier and a patrician woman. Let's call them Varro and Julia. Varro is a seasoned legionary, a veteran of Caesar's campaigns. He fought alongside Caesar in Gaul and followed him across the Rubicon. To Varro, Caesar isn't a tyrant. He's the general who promised him land, a future, and a pension for his years of service. Caesar's death isn't liberation, it's a catastrophe. His world has been upended. The man who guaranteed his future is gone. Now Varro faces a critical choice. Does he join the forces of Caesar's heir Octavian and his loyal general Mark Antony to avenge his commander? Or does he try to fade back into civilian life, hoping the ensuing chaos doesn't swallow him whole? For Varro and thousands like him, the choice is about loyalty and survival. His decision will determine whether he helps forge a new empire from the ashes of the Republic or becomes another forgotten victim of its collapse. Now, let's turn to Julia. She's the daughter of a traditionalist senator, raised on stories of Republican virtue and the evils of absolute power. Her family views Caesar as the destroyer of their way of life. They may have even secretly supported the conspiracy. For Julia, Caesar's death might initially feel like a victory for freedom. But the reality that follows is not the restored republic her father dreamed of, but a bloody power vacuum. The city descends into mob violence. Proscription lists are drawn up, and men of wealth and influence are hunted in the streets. Julia's world of refined privilege is suddenly precarious. Her choice is just as stark as Varro's. Does she cling to the dying ideals of the old republic, supporting figures like Brutus and Cassius, and risk losing everything in their inevitable defeat? Or does she adapt, perhaps through a strategic marriage to a supporter of the new regime, securing her family's safety and influence in the dawning age of emperors? Her decision reflects the dilemma of the Roman aristocracy: resist and perish, or adapt and survive in a world that has been irrevocably changed. The assassination of Caesar did not restore the Republic. Instead, it plunged Rome into another 13 years of civil war. The conspirators were hunted down and defeated. Out of the chaos, Caesar's grandnephew and adopted son, Octavian, emerged as the ultimate victor. He would skillfully navigate the treacherous political landscape, defeat his rivals, including Mark Antony and Cleopatra, and eventually rename himself Augustus, becoming Rome's first true emperor. The Republic was dead, and the Roman Empire had begun. Caesar's fate was the catalyst, but the choices of countless individuals like Varro and Julia, the soldiers, the citizens, the aristocrats, were the bricks that built the new imperial world. Their decisions, driven by loyalty, fear, ambition, and the simple desire to survive, are the human story at the heart of this epic historical turning point. What Caesar started, his death only accelerated. The dream of the Republic died with him on the Senate floor, giving birth to an empire that would dominate the world for centuries. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back to ancient Rome. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the most pivotal moments in history. Let me know in the comments what you think. Was Brutus a hero or a traitor? We'll see you in the next video. Have you ever paused for a moment and wondered, what will I leave behind? It's a big question, isn't it? We get so caught up in the day-to-day hustle, meeting deadlines, paying bills, planning our next weekend, that we rarely stop to think about the bigger picture. We're all writing a story with our lives, chapter by chapter, day by day. But what will the title of that book be? What will be its central theme? Today, I want to explore this idea of legacy, not as some grand, intimidating monument we have to build, but as something we are creating in every single moment. Let's be honest, when we hear the word legacy, our minds often jump to famous names. We think of inventors who changed the world, artists whose work has endured for centuries, leaders who shaped nations. And while their contributions are incredible, tying legacy only to fame or fortune can make it feel completely out of reach for most of us. It can make us feel small, like our ordinary lives don't have the same potential to matter. But that's where I think we get it wrong. A legacy isn't about having your name in a history book. It's about the ripples you create in the world around you, no matter how big or small the pond. Think about someone who had a profound impact on your life. Was it a world-famous celebrity? Maybe, but more likely it was a teacher who saw potential in you when you couldn't see it in yourself. Maybe it was a grandparent whose kindness felt like a warm blanket on a cold day, whose stories taught you about where you came from. Perhaps it was a friend who sat with you in silence when you were hurting, offering nothing but their presence, which turned out to be everything you needed. These people left a legacy with you. Their actions, their words, their belief in you, that's a powerful, living inheritance. They might not have a statue in a park, but they have a permanent place in the architecture of who you are. That's a legacy. So how do we start building our own? I believe it begins with a simple act of reflection. Taking a genuine, honest look at ourselves. It's about asking, what do I stand for? What values are non-negotiable for me? Is it honesty? Compassion? Courage? Creativity? When you get clear on your core values, they become your compass. They guide your decisions, big and small. Living in alignment with your values is the foundation of an authentic legacy. It's about being the person you claim to be, not just when people are watching, but in the quiet, unapplauded moments of your life. That integrity is magnetic. It's what people remember. Legacy is also deeply connected to our actions. It's the doing part of our values. If you value community, are you showing up for your neighbors? If you value learning, are you sharing your knowledge with others? It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. It can be as simple as making time to truly listen to a friend, offering a helping hand to a stranger, or pursuing a passion that brings you joy and inspires others. Every time you choose kindness over judgment, you're laying a brick in your legacy. Every time you stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult, you're reinforcing that foundation. These small, consistent actions accumulate over time, creating a beautiful mosaic that tells the story of who you were and what you cared about. One of the most powerful ways to build a legacy is through the knowledge and skills we share. You don't have to be a formal teacher. We are all experts in something. Maybe you're an amazing cook and you pass down your family recipes. That's a legacy of flavor, tradition, and love. Maybe you're a skilled gardener and you teach a neighbor how to nurture their first plant. That's a legacy of growth and patience. Perhaps you've navigated a difficult period in your life, and you share your story, offering hope and a roadmap to someone who is just starting that same journey. That is an incredibly powerful legacy of resilience and empathy. Your experiences, your wisdom, your unique perspective, these are gifts. Sharing them is how they multiply and live on beyond you. But reflection isn't just about looking forward. It's also about looking back and making peace with our past. None of us are perfect. We've all made mistakes. We've all had moments we wish we could do over. Part of building a meaningful legacy is learning to forgive ourselves, to learn from those missteps, and to use that wisdom to become a better person. It's about owning our whole story, not just the highlight reel. Showing our humanity, our vulnerability, our growth that gives others permission to be imperfect too. A legacy of grace for ourselves and for others is one of the most beautiful things we can leave behind. It is also crucial to remember that your legacy isn't just about what you leave asterisk at the end asterisk of your life. You are living your legacy right now. The way you treat the cashier at the grocery store is part of your legacy. The way you encourage your colleagues at work is part of your legacy. The way you love your family and friends, the way you show up for them today, is your legacy in action. Don't wait for some future moment to start being the person you want to be remembered as. Be that person now. The future is just an accumulation of all your nows. Let's try a little exercise. Imagine your 80th birthday. You're surrounded by people you love. What would you want them to say about you? What stories would you want them to tell? Would they talk about your achievements? Maybe, but I bet they would focus more on how you made them feel. They'd remember your laughter, your support during tough times, the way your eyes lit up when you talked about something you were passionate about. They'd remember your character. That feeling, that memory that is the heart of your legacy. So, as we go about our week, let's try to be a little more intentional. Let's think about the ripples we're creating. Let's ask ourselves, is this action in line with the story I want to tell? It's not about adding pressure or striving for perfection. It's about bringing a little more awareness, a little more purpose into our daily lives. It's about understanding that our ordinary lives are anything but. They are the training ground for an extraordinary legacy, one of kindness, of connection, of love. What you do matters. You matter. And the story you're writing with your life is a story worth telling well. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today, reflecting on such a big and beautiful topic. If this video resonated with you, I'd love it if you give it a thumbs up and maybe share it with someone who might need to hear this message. And of course, don't forget to subscribe for more conversations like this. Take care and go live your legacy.